What kind of man dares to stare down injustice and turn its own weapons against it? Marcus Ellison knew the answer, though he never sought the question. He stood on the cracked sidewalk of a Chicago street, rain pelting his tailored suit, the city's pulse throbbing under the weight of a humid summer night. His breath was steady, but his eyes burned with a fire that could outlast any storm. Across from him, Officer Daniel Hargrove, badge gleaming like a false crown, barked accusations, his voice slicing through the drizzle. "You think you can just walk away? I know your type. Ellison, you're trouble." Marcus's lips twitched, not in fear, but in the quiet certainty of a man who'd faced this script before and rewritten it. The night had started innocently enough. Marcus, a federal prosecutor with a reputation for dismantling corrupt systems, was driving home from a late case review. His mind was still tangled in legal briefs when the red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. He pulled over, hands already on the wheel, every move calculated from years of navigating a world that too often saw his skin before his credentials. Hargrove approached, his flashlight cutting through the rain like a blade, his tone dripping with something darker than authority. "Step out of the car," he demanded. No explanation, no cause. Marcus complied, not because he feared Hargrove, but because he knew the game. He'd played it since he was a kid in Englewood, where every glance from a cop felt like a loaded gun. Hargrove's questions came fast, each one laced with venom. "Where'd you get this car? You don't look like you belong in it." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he answered calmly, his voice a low hum of control. "It's mine. I'm heading home from work." Hargrove scoffed, scribbling something on his notepad, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face, searching for a crack, a flinch, anything to justify the stop. There was none. Marcus stood like a pillar, his presence a silent rebuke to the officer's assumptions. The air crackled with tension, the kind that makes bystanders hold their breath. A woman across the street clutched her phone, recording, while a man hesitated, his umbrella drooping as he watched the scene unfold. This wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge rooted in something older, uglier. Hargrove didn't know who Marcus was, not yet. To him, Marcus was just another black man to intimidate, another name to scribble in a report that would never see scrutiny. But Marcus wasn't just anyone. He was a man who'd clawed his way from public housing to the federal courthouse, a man who'd made it his mission to hold power accountable. Hargrove's mistake wasn't pulling him over, it was thinking he could break him. The officer stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "You're gonna regret this, pal. I've got enough to make your life hell." Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. "You sure about that?" he asked, his words soft but heavy, like the first rumble of thunder. Hargrove froze, caught off guard by the quiet confidence. For a moment, the rain seemed to pause, the world holding its breath. Then Hargrove smirked, scribbling again, convinced he held the upper hand. He didn't. He was writing his own downfall. Marcus knew the law better than most, better than Hargrove ever would. He'd spent years studying it, wielding it, bending it to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. As Hargrove ranted about suspicious behavior, Marcus was already cataloging every misstep, every violation of protocol. The officer's arrogance was a house of cards, and Marcus was the wind. But he didn't strike yet. He let Hargrove talk, let him dig deeper, each word another nail in the coffin of his own career. The stop ended with a ticket, some vague citation about a taillight Marcus knew was fine. Hargrove handed it over with a sneer, expecting Marcus to crumble under the weight of his authority. Instead, Marcus folded the ticket into his pocket, his eyes never leaving Hargrove's. "See you around, officer," he said, his voice calm but laced with something that made Hargrove's smirk falter. As Marcus drove away, the rain intensified, washing the street clean. But the real storm was just beginning. The next morning, Marcus sat at his desk in the federal courthouse, the ticket crumpled in his hand. His office was a fortress of order, case files stacked neatly, law books lining the shelves, a single photo of his mother smiling from the corner. but inside a fire burned. Hargrove's stop wasn't just personal. It was a symptom of a disease Marcus had fought his entire career. He'd seen too many lives derailed by men like Hargrove, men who wielded badges like scepters, unchecked and untouchable. Not this time. Marcus pulled up Hargrove's record on his computer. It wasn't hard to find. The officer had a history, complaints of excessive force, racial profiling, all swept under the rug by a department that valued loyalty over justice. Marcus's fingers hovered over the keyboard, his mind racing. He could file a complaint, but that was a pebble against a mountain. Hargrove needed to be exposed, dismantled, not just reprimanded. Then his phone buzzed. A text from a colleague. Check the news. Your guy's doubling down. Marcus opened his laptop to a local news site. There it was, a story about Hargrove filing a defamation lawsuit against an uncooperative suspect from traffic stop. The suspect? Marcus. The article painted Hargrove as a hero, a cop just doing his job, harassed by a belligerent driver. Marcus's name wasn't mentioned, yet, but the lies were bold, accusing him of resisting arrest, threatening an officer, even implying he'd stolen the car. Marcus laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Hargrove wasn't just reckless. He was delusional. The lawsuit was a power play, a desperate attempt to flip the script. Hargrove thought he could bully Marcus into silence, scare him with legal threats. He didn't know Marcus spent his days in courtrooms, tearing apart cases built on weaker lies than these. Marcus leaned back, his mind already mapping the battlefield. Hargrove's lawsuit wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity. He called his friend Lena, a civil rights attorney with a knack for turning predators into prey. "They're saying you resisted arrest," she said, her voice crackling with indignation. "This guy's got no evidence. Marcus, he's banking on you folding." Marcus smiled grimly. "He's about to learn I don't fold." Lena laughed, to sound like a war cry. "Let's bury him." They spent hours strategizing, pulling Hargrove's reports, cross-referencing them with the woman's video from the scene, which had gone viral overnight. The footage was damning. Hargrove's aggression, his baseless accusations, all caught in grainy clarity. Marcus hadn't resisted. He'd barely spoken. The internet was ablaze, hashtags calling for Hargrove's badge trending by noon. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with public outrage. He wanted justice, the kind that left no room for excuses. Then came the twist. Lena uncovered a sealed file from Hargrove's past, a wrongful death case buried by the department. A black teenager, stopped for suspicious behavior, had died in custody. Hargrove was the lead officer. The family's lawsuit had been settled quietly, the details locked away. Marcus's heart sank, not just for the boy, but for the years he'd spent believing the system could change without being forced. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every name Hargrove had erased, every life he'd shattered. Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of it settling in his chest. Hargrove wasn't just a bad cop. He was a predator. And predators don't stop until they're caged. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a familiar arena where Marcus had spent years dismantling lies. Today, though, the stakes felt heavier. He sat at the plaintiff's table, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. Across the room, Hargrove slouched in a cheap blazer, his lawyer whispering frantically as the judge entered. The lawsuit was Hargrove's gambit, claiming Marcus had defamed him by spreading falsehoods about the traffic stop. But Marcus wasn't here to defend himself. He was here to attack. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, called the room to order. Hargrove's lawyer stood, painting a picture of a dedicated officer slandered by a vengeful suspect. Marcus listened, his face a mask, but inside, he was cataloging every exaggeration, every half-truth. When it was his turn, he rose, his voice steady but electric, like a storm gathering strength. "Your Honor, this case isn't about defamation. It's about a pattern of abuse, a pattern Officer Hargrove has hidden for years." The room shifted, murmurs rippling through the gallery. Marcus presented the video from the traffic stop, each frame a hammer blow to Hargrove's story. The judge's eyes narrowed as Hargrove's voice boomed through the speakers, his accusations baseless, his tone venomous. Marcus didn't stop there. He introduced Hargrove's record, complaints, reprimands, the sealed wrongful death case Lena had unearthed. The lawyer objected, but Marcus was relentless, his arguments sharp as a blade. "This isn't about one night," he said. "This is about a man who's abused his power for decades." Hargrove's face reddened, his fists clenching under the table. He leaned toward his lawyer, muttering, but Marcus caught his eye, holding it with a gaze that said, "You're done." The twist from the sealed file had shaken Hargrove's team. They hadn't expected Marcus to dig that deep, to bring a ghost from the past into the light. The boy's name, Jalen Carter, hung in the air, a silent accusation. Marcus spoke of Jalen's family, their grief, their silenced voices, and the courtroom grew heavy with the weight of it. The judge called a recess, and Marcus stepped outside, the Chicago wind biting at his face. Lena joined him, her eyes fierce. "You've got him rattled," she said. "But he's not done fighting." Marcus nodded, his mind already on the next move. Hargrove wasn't just fighting for his reputation. He was fighting for his badge, his pension, his freedom. And men like that don't go down easily. Back in the courtroom, Hargrove took the stand, his voice thick with rehearsed sincerity. He spun a tale of a dangerous suspect, a routine stop gone wrong. But Marcus was ready. His cross-examination was surgical, each question peeling back another layer of Hargrove's lies. "You claim I resisted," Marcus said, his voice calm but piercing. "Yet the video shows me standing still, hands visible. Can you explain that?" Hargrove stammered, his confidence cracking. Marcus pressed harder, bringing up the wrongful death case, the complaints, the pattern. The room was a pressure cooker, every eye on Hargrove as he unraveled. By the time Marcus finished, the officer's bravado was gone, replaced by a man who looked small, exposed. The judge's face was unreadable, but the gallery buzzed with whispers. Marcus sat, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with the thrill of turning the hunter into the hunted. Hargrove had walked into this courtroom thinking he could bully a black man into submission. He hadn't counted on that man being Marcus Ellison. The trial stretched into its third day, each hour a battle of wills. Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the courtroom, some filled with hope, others with skepticism. Hargrove's lawyer doubled down, calling character witnesses, fellow officers who painted Hargrove as a pillar of the community. But their testimonies were hollow, rehearsed, and Marcus dismantled them with precision. He brought forward Jalen Carter's mother, her voice trembling as she spoke of her son, a boy who loved basketball and dreamed of college, cut down by a system that protected men like Hargrove. The gallery wept, and even the judge's stoic mask wavered. Outside, the case had become a firestorm. Protesters gathered at the courthouse steps, their signs demanding justice for Jalen, for Marcus, for every name lost to the shadows. The viral video had sparked a movement, and Marcus's name was now public, his face plastered across news feeds as the prosecutor who dared to fight back. He hated the spotlight, but he couldn't stop now. This wasn't just about him. It was about the kid he'd been, the one who'd ducked cops on his way to school, the one who'd sworn to change things. Hargrove's desperation grew palpable. During a break, he cornered Marcus in the hallway, his voice low and venomous. "You think you're untouchable? I've got friends, Ellison. You'll regret this." Marcus didn't flinch. "Threats don't work on me," he said, his voice ice. "You should have learned that by now." Hargrove's eyes burned, but he backed off, the encounter a spark in a powder keg. Lena, watching from a distance, whispered, "He's scared, Marcus. That makes him dangerous." Back in court, Marcus called his final witness, the woman from the traffic stop, Sarah, who'd recorded everything. Her testimony was unshakable, her voice steady as she described Hargrove's aggression, his lies. The video played again, this time with Sarah's commentary, each word a nail in Hargrove's coffin. The officer's lawyer tried to discredit her, but Sarah held her ground, her eyes locked on Marcus as if to say, "We're in this together." The twist of Jalen's case had already shifted the tide, but Sarah's testimony sealed it. Hargrove's story was crumbling, and he knew it. As the day ended, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the photo of his mother. She'd raise him alone, working double shifts to keep him in school, always telling him, "You're stronger than their hate." He felt her strength now, guiding him. But doubt crept in. Hargrove's friends weren't just empty threats. The department had circled its wagons, and Marcus knew the cost of challenging power. He'd seen colleagues ostracized, careers ruined. For a moment, he wondered if he'd gone too far. Then his phone buzzed, a message from Jalen's mother. "Thank you for giving my boy a voice." The doubt vanished. He was ready for the endgame. The next morning, Hargrove's lawyer tried a last-ditch effort, claiming Marcus had manipulated the narrative, that the video was edited. But Marcus was prepared. He presented metadata proving the footage's authenticity, along with dashcam records Hargrove's team had forgotten to disclose. The judge's patience snapped, her gavel a warning shot. Marcus could feel it, the walls closing in on Hargrove. The officer's bravado was gone, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. The courtroom was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard for Hargrove's lies. The final day of the trial dawned gray, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. Marcus walked into the courthouse with Lena at his side, their steps synchronized, a silent vow to see this through. The gallery was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Hargrove sat alone, his lawyer's confidence eroded, his face a mask of defiance hiding panic. Marcus felt no pity. This was justice, raw and unyielding, the kind he'd spent his life chasing. The judge called for closing arguments. Hargrove's lawyer spoke first, his voice thin, grasping at straws. He tried to reframe the case as a misunderstanding, a good cop caught in a bad moment. But the room wasn't listening. The evidence was too damning, the truth too loud. When Marcus stood, the courtroom fell silent. Every word he spoke a spark in the dark. "This isn't about one traffic stop," he said, his voice steady but resonant. "It's about a system that lets men like Officer Hargrove hide behind a badge. It's about Jalen Carter, whose life was stolen. It's about every person who's been silenced. Today, we say no more." The gallery erupted, the judge's gavel barely containing the chaos. Marcus sat, his heart pounding, not with fear but with the weight of what he'd done. He'd turned Hargrove's weapon, his lawsuit, against him, exposing not just one man but a broken system. The judge retired to deliberate, and the weight was agony. Lena gripped his hand under the table, her eyes fierce. "You did it," she whispered. Marcus didn't respond. He wouldn't believe it until the gavel fell. When the judge returned, the room held its breath. Her voice was measured, but her words were a blade. "The plaintiff's case is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm recommending a full investigation into Officer Hargrove's conduct, past and present." The gallery roared, but Marcus stayed still, his eyes on Hargrove. The officer's face collapsed, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his actions crushed him. He'd come to bury Marcus. Instead, he'd buried himself. The twist of Jalen's case had been the turning point, but it was Marcus's relentless pursuit of truth that sealed Hargrove's fate. The officer was escorted out, his badge no longer a shield. Outside, the crowd chanted Marcus's name, but he slipped away, needing air, needing quiet. He stood on the courthouse steps, the rain starting again, washing over him like a baptism. Lena found him, her smile soft. "You didn't just win a case, Marcus. You started something." He nodded, the weight of it settling in. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Marcus drove home, the city blurring past. He thought of Jalen, of his mother, of every face he'd seen in courtrooms over the years. He'd fought for them, and he'd keep fighting. The system was cracked, but not unbreakable. He'd proven that today. As he pulled into his driveway, his phone buzzed again, a news alert. Hargrove had been suspended, pending a criminal investigation. Marcus exhaled, a small smile breaking through. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was possible. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Marcus's victory rippled beyond the courtroom, igniting debates on news channels, in community centers, across dinner tables. The video of the traffic stop played on repeat, a symbol of resistance. Protesters marched, demanding reform, their voices amplified by Marcus's stand. He became a reluctant hero, his face on every screen, his name a rallying cry. But fame was a double-edged sword. Threats came, anonymous calls, letters slipped under his door. Hargrove's friends hadn't forgotten, and Marcus knew the fight was far from over. He threw himself back into work, taking on cases with renewed fire. Each file was a life, a story, a chance to chip away at the system's flaws. But Jalen Carter's case haunted him. He met with Jalen's mother, Renee, in a quiet cafe, her eyes tired but grateful. "You gave him justice," she said, her voice breaking. Marcus shook his head. "Not enough. Not yet." He promised to reopen Jalen's case, to push for accountability, not just for Hargrove, but for every officer who'd looked the other way. Renee reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "You're enough," she said. The words hit harder than he expected. At home, Marcus found solace in routine, coffee at dawn, case law by night. But the weight of the trial lingered. He'd exposed Hargrove, but the system that created him was still standing. Lena pushed him to speak out, to use his platform, but Marcus hesitated. He was an activist. He was a lawyer, a man who fought with facts, not speeches. Yet the world kept pulling him forward. Invitations poured in, talk shows, panels, even a book deal. He turned most down, but one request caught his eye, a community forum in Englewood, his old neighborhood. He went, expecting a small crowd. Instead, the room was packed. Kids, parents, elders, all looking to him for hope. He spoke from the heart. No script, just truth. "I grew up here," he said, his voice steady. "I know what it's like to feel invisible. But you're not. We're not. Keep fighting, keep learning, keep holding them accountable." The room erupted, and for the first time, Marcus felt the power of his own voice. A kid in the front row, no older than 15, raised his hand. "You think we can change things?" Marcus looked at him, seeing himself at that age. "I know we can," he said. The kid smiled, and Marcus felt something shift inside him. The twist of Jalen's case kept resurfacing. Investigators reopened it, and Hargrove's name was now tied to a federal probe. Other officers were implicated, their silence as damning as Hargrove's actions. Marcus worked with Lena to build a case, not just against individuals, but against the policies that enabled them. It was grueling, but every step felt like progress. He started mentoring young lawyers, sharing his strategies, his fire. The system wasn't broken overnight, but it was bending. Late one night, Marcus sat in his office, the city quiet outside. He opened a drawer, pulling out the ticket from that night. It was just paper now, a relic of a battle won. He tore it in half, the sound sharp in the silence. He wasn't done fighting, but he'd learned something. Every victory, no matter how small, was a step towards something bigger. Years later, Marcus stood at a podium in Englewood, the same streets where he'd once dodged trouble, now lined with hope. The community center he'd helped fund was opening, a place for kids to learn, to dream, to fight. The crowd was diverse, families, activists, even a few cops who'd come to listen, not to intimidate. Marcus looked out, his mother's photo tucked in his pocket, her words echoing, "You're stronger than their hate." He'd lived those words, turned them into a legacy. Hargrove was gone, stripped of his badge, facing charges that would likely end in a cell. The federal probe had exposed a network of corruption, leading to reforms Marcus had once thought impossible. Jalen Carter's case was reopened, his name no longer a whisper, but a beacon. Marcus had worked with Renee to create a scholarship in Jalen's name, ensuring his dream of college lived on for others. The pain of loss never faded, but it fueled something greater. Marcus's life had changed, too. He'd married Lena, their partnership a force both in and out of the courtroom. They had a daughter, named after his mother, who'd already learned to ask questions, to challenge, to stand tall. Marcus taught her what he'd learned. justice isn't given. It's taken, one fight at a time. He still worked as a prosecutor, but now he trained others, passing on the tools to dismantle systems that had stood too long. The forum that night was electric. Marcus spoke of resilience, of community, of the power of truth. He told the story of that rainy night, not as a victim, but as a victor. They'll try to break you, he said, his voice carrying the weight of every battle he'd fought. But you're not their story. You write your own. The crowd rose, their applause a wave that carried him back to that sidewalk, to the moment he'd stared down Hargrove and chosen to fight. As he stepped off the stage, a young woman approached, her eyes bright with determination. "I'm going to law school," she said. "Because of you." Marcus smiled, his heart full. He saw Jalen in her, his mother, himself. The fight wasn't over, but it wasn't his alone anymore. It belonged to them all. He walked outside, the Chicago night cool and clear. The stars were out, a rare sight in the city. He thought of the kid from the forum years ago, the one who'd asked if change was possible. Marcus had answered then, but now he lived the answer. Change wasn't just possible, it was happening. One case, one voice, one stand at a time.